Welcome to Bridging the Gap, Law, Therapy, and Justice.
Welcome to Bridging the Gap, Law, Therapy, and Justice with Caitlin Burgess. I'm Caitlin Burgess. I'm an attorney and licensed marriage and family therapist. So on this show, we explore the intersection of law, therapy, and forensic practice, particularly in family law matters where emotions run very high and children can be impacted by the stress. Today, I'm joined by Virginie Goldstein, a licensed marriage and family therapist and the founder of the Tech Connect Reset in the San Francisco Bay Area. So Virginie works with children, families, and also individuals, especially adolescents, to address problematic screen use and strengthen parent-child connections. In this episode, we are focusing on how divorce and family conflict can shape a child's relationship with screens and why those patterns can become especially problematic during times of stress, such as a high conflict divorce. Welcome, Virginie. It is so great to see you.
Thank you, Caitlin, for hosting me. It's been a pleasure to spend some time with you for this podcast, and I feel very honored to be a guest today. I have met Caitlin we met about 7 years ago over a court case, and then since then it's been a wonderful collaboration. I really, appreciate Caitlin as, wonderful professional, very, very ethical, very genuine, and very caring with each family you've been working with. As you know, Caitlin has been a licensed attorney and a licensed marriage and family therapist, and she's been using this, I would say, powerful and unique, training to really help family navigating like these divorces and a high conflict situation for children who have been really struggling at times. And yes, our collaboration has been wonderful for so many years now. So I feel very grateful to be here today.
Yeah, right back at you, Virginie. That was so nice of you. Our collaboration has always been great. I've always enjoyed working with you and your expertise. And you're doing this really important work now because screen addiction is a hot topic. It's just been really challenging. I know we're both mothers in addition to being professionals, and it's an issue among in many families. So I want you, if you could, to start talking about the work you do with children, families, and adolescents around screen addiction.
Yeah, so I've been working with children, teenagers, and families, and also young adults. And so when people come to me, they come to me with the issue of my child is struggling with screen, like he has a bad relationship with the screen. He spends so many hours like playing video games, social media, watching, YouTube videos. And they say like, you need to help my child. And I'm like, I'm happy to help with your child, but we cannot work on a quick fix. So we need to understand, there is many underlying problems, connected to the behavior with the screen. So not only I look at the behavior really, the behavior with the screen, but I also do an assessment, to assess, if there is any issue with like anxiety, depression, ADHD, even with high functioning autism kids, it's a big underlying problem for those children who are really spending so much time on the screen. And definitely when family are in high conflict, it's really even, more important to address those underlying problems when the family comes to me. So I make sure that I really do a full, understanding of what's going on, with the kids who is using the screen as a way to cope with some situations or some behaviors or some.
Yeah. So you brought
some
up
situations and some diagnoses actually. So
situations and diagnosis, right? So we were talking. You mentioned divorce and high conflict. So I'm really interested, Virginie, in your experience. How do you see that stress showing up in a child's relationship with screens?
the first thing you see when you see the child coming home and I go to the screen, to play video games or watch YouTube videos or like be on the social media, like it's a way for them that not only they're entertaining themselves, but they're trying to regulate because they're trying to cope with the situation that, that is unpleasant. They're trying to cope with unpleasant feelings. They're trying to cope with, feelings and situations that they have a hard time to manage, and so there is one study from UCSF 2024 that found a strong association between, family conflict and, and adolescents who are struggling with those situations. And as a result, they spend more time on the screen. So there is a very, very strong research on that.
Interesting. So what do you think it is, Virginie, about family conflict that make the screens feel like the place the children want to go? Is it like an escape? What do you think it is about the family conflict?
If you picture yourself as a child, let's say my parents are divorcing. I'm 12 years old. My parents are divorcing. They are in the middle of separation. They constantly fight. And I'm at 12 years old and I'm like, I have no power. I have no control. So going on the screen is a way for me to to feel control, to feel reassured, I am in a world where, and I also forget about my problems with my family when I go on the screen.
So it's like an escape for them.
It's an escape for them, yes.
Escape. So in your experience, what type of emotional turmoil tend to sit underneath excessive screen use in children and teens? So what do you think drives it? Is it depression, anxiety, loneliness, low self-esteem, or all of them? Like what do you think is really driving this?
Yeah, this is a good question because I think that really addresses the underlying problem of why the kids are spending so much time on the screen. And definitely many times what I've been seeing in my practice is like a lot of time when kids come to me, they have a diagnosis of ADHD, but also I do assessment to see if they have any anxiety, if they have any depression, and also if they've been bullied at school, so this is another issue. And, also they feel like they have a feeling of, when parents are separating, they have a feeling of abandonment and they can control that. So this is, I think, most of the underlying problems that comes, into the picture. And you have to know that a lot of time in general, whether if it's a behavior related to the screen, like a lot of time when kids, when parents are divorcing, like a lot of time it rises like symptoms of anxiety and depression. So it raises symptoms of anxiety and depression when actually family are separating, so, and it creates like a lot of emotional dysregulation at this point. So, and when the child is on the screen, so it's really very powerful for them to be, to play a game, and they feel much in control there.
So it gives them a sense of control.
Yes.
You think?
Yes.
So when screens become a coping mechanism, how does that change the way children and adolescents use screens compared to typical use? Like, when do you, as parents, know that it's becoming problematic, that the screen use is perhaps becoming addictive for the child or adolescent? What are some signs in your work experience?
There is a difference between like a child who uses the screen or like is watching a show, and enjoy the show, versus the child who is like using the screen as a way to regulate, right? And it becomes an addiction because when the child can stop using the screen, and then you will see like the child, it becomes dysregulated, and as he's been using the screen, with using the screen is using the screen for so many hours, like it becomes dysregulated. And when it's time to stop, then you will see the child who becomes, screaming, crying, can stop, using the screen, in a calm way, right? And then as a result, you're going to see like a bunch of withdrawal symptoms. And
like in a real addiction, like actual withdrawals. Like
yes. And the withdrawals, some of the withdrawal symptoms is like you will see the kids, becoming moody, becoming depressed, losing interest doing of their activities, having issue with sleep, having issue with relationship with people, having issue with relationship with parents, right? And we also have to know the thing with this kind of addiction, it's because it triggers a lot of dopamine. And so when it triggers a lot of dopamine, that way it's a like spikes of dopamine. It's a very intense dopamine release. When it is time to stop, it's a crush of dopamine, and the kid has a very hard time to deal with that. And this is why they start having, those withdrawal symptoms. And whereas if you have, to compare the risk of dopamine with kids who have player sports, or socialize with friends in person, it releases dopamine, but not as the level of intensity that screen does to those children.
Wow, that's really interesting, and at the same time, it's also really concerning. So, getting back to two home families, when kiddos are transitioning from one home to the other in a shared custody situation, what tends to happen when there are different rules or expectations around screen use in different homes?
This is a very good question. And then, whether this is about the screen or not about the screen, when there is like different rules, in both households, it's very disrupting for the child. And, it tends to create more anxiety because the child doesn't know what to expect. And then when it's about the screen, so it becomes like an advantage for the child. And the child is like, okay, my mom or my dad is more strict with the screen, but let's say my mom is more strict with the screen. My dad is more, laid back with the screen. So then I'm going to use that as a bargain. I'm going to manipulate my parents in some way. So then I can, I can do whatever I want. And so it becomes an advantage for the child, and it becomes a disadvantage, for the parents. And so trying to have, the same rule in the same environment is going to help the child to regulate and actually is going to regulate better, without using the screen when there is like consistency with both, households.
Yeah, I can see how with screen use, if a child is having problematic behaviors around screen use, how important it is for the parents to really come together. Otherwise, it could create a situation maybe where a child doesn't want to visit one parent because that parent won't let them use the screens as much. So, yeah, so I guess I want to know as well, what impact do you think does reduced structure or consistency in a home have on a child's screen use? So we know that children really benefit from structure and consistency. So do you feel if there's a lack of structure and consistency that can sort of create more of a screen use problem? Like, what are some of your experiences there?
Yeah, the structure is a form of emotional safety for the child. So when the routine collapse, when parents separate, so there is no impact is impacting the routine. And so the child feels less safe, when there is like this, lack of structure, right? And then they're also scared at times. So they feel less safe. So then they look for some sort of regulation with the screen. And a lot of time, so like you're going to see in the research, you're going to see like a lot of correlation between, high conflict family, high conflict divorce, or like family who are like divorcing with, adolescents using more screen as a way to regulate. And whether this is a chaotic environment or it can be a loving environment, but if there is no structure, so the child is going to feel more dysregulated and is going to seek, a way to regulate using the screen. So basically is that, when there is like two different roles in two households, it's more like a risk factor for the child to develop more screen addiction.
Understood. And so what are some signs in your practice that a child or adolescent may be relying on screens in a way that reflects a deeper emotional stress?
Yeah, so I will look at like a cluster of signs rather than just one thing. So, like we talked about earlier, it's like if the child, has a meltdown at the time to stop the screen, so it's a signal, right? Like we say, like, so it's taking a break. The parent is asking the child to stop using the screen, and then the kid is, having a meltdown. So that's a sign, so you're also going to see a shift in the mood, and the kid is going to be happy playing on the screen, and then they're going to stop playing with the screen. They're going to be upset and mad and angry, right? And so, so we have to look at that, especially at the time of an exchange, in the custody, like going from one house to another one. So this is where you have to pay attention, especially during that time.
So it sounds like a lot of dysregulation, like an abnormal amount of dysregulation when they're told that they have to stop using the screen, is a sign that it's becoming a problem. That would be your experience. Okay. And so finally, I have one more question here. For parents who see increased screen use, but don't connect it to family stress, what do you think they're missing? So they're going through this high conflict divorce, they're in litigation, there's attorneys on every side, there are motions being filed, and suddenly the kids are using screens all the time. But the parents aren't connecting it to that. So what do you think they're missing in those situations? Do you feel like they're just not aware that the conflict is causing the problem? They're so absorbed in their own conflict. Like, what do you think's missing there?
I think what is missing is the connection with the child to start with, right? And I think, yeah, I understand when family are divorcing, there is a lot of stress. There is a lot of stress for everyone. There is a lot of stress for parents, a lot of stress for the children. And so parents are absorbed with their own problems. And they kind of miss, like, the child, they don't pay attention to the child as much as they used to be, maybe, and so it feels like talking to the child, connecting with the child, trying to understand what is going on with the child, try to connect with the child in a way that, the type of activities they're doing on the screen, I think the parents need to pay attention to that. So they're really missing the connection with the child where, many times the parents are overwhelmed and then they're going to give the screen to the child to keep themselves busy. And then they lose the connection with them.
So really being more attuned to your child, I think, would be helpful in these situations, and sort of being cognizant of your own actions and the way you could be inadvertently contributing to that screen use addiction by giving it to them because you need to be focusing on something else.
Yes.
So anyway, Virginie, very useful and helpful information. Thank you for all the good work that you're doing in this area. Very much needed today in our culture for sure. So that's it for today's episode of Bridging the Gap, Law, Therapy, and Justice. To learn more about my practice and my interdisciplinary clinical, legal, and forensic work, you can go to CaitlinBurgess.com. And to learn more about Virginie Goldstein's practice and her company, the Tech Connect Reset, you can visit just techconnectreset.com. And thanks for listening. And don't forget to like, subscribe, or share this episode with someone you think may benefit from it. Thanks so much. And thanks again, Virginie.
Thanks for watching. Be sure to hit that like and subscribe button and leave us a review in the comments.